Okay, now on the question of the carbon tax, and Tony Abbott was really quite firm on this this week, that he says if he wins the next election and the Labor Party refuses to cave in on the carbon tax, then he's determined to go to a double dissolution. Here he is.
It's hard to imagine the Labor Party, beaten in an election that's a referendum on the carbon tax, committing suicide twice by resisting the new government's mandate. But if they do, there is a constitutional procedure designed for just this eventuality. It's called a double dissolution. I would not hesitate to seek a second mandate to repeal this toxic tax. Indeed, it would be my duty to do so.
Now, Lenore, you raised a fascinating scenario here that if he was to go ahead with that, you have an election in late next year, late 2013, and a whole bunch of new senators are elected, but they don't get to take their seats until the middle of 2014, by which time, if Tony Abbott got his way, there'd be another election.
They've lost their job already.
They'd be facing another election before they got to sit in the red chamber.
That's right. I mean, I think Tony Abbott has built his entire political success on repealing the carbon tax. He has to say that he can do it and that he can do it quickly and easily. But there are scenarios under which it'd be much more difficult for him to do. Now, I mean, in the first instance, those scenarios are predicated on him not winning control of the Senate. And there are some Labor advisors who are actually quite concerned that at their current level of polling, the coalition could in fact win control of the Senate, and then Tony Abbott can do what he likes. But if he didn't win control of the Senate, he would either have to satisfy the requirements for a double dissolution, that is, 2 rejections by the Senate 3 months apart, within the time frame of late next year to July 2014.
Tough time, though.
Yeah, and the Senate's constitutionally allowed to have inquiries and committees and can do all sorts of things to sort of drag it out. Or he'd have to wait till after the new Senate took its place in 2014, which would put the repeal into sort of early 2015 probably. Now, This is all predicated, as he quite rightly says, on Labor still maintaining its support for a carbon tax. And he says, look, if they were swept out of office in an election largely fought on that issue, they might change their mind. And they might. They're still saying they won't. And if they don't, then it could be much more complicated than he's letting on. And
Dennis, there is a prospect of that. I mean, what Lenore calls the 4-2 scenario that the coalition would have to achieve around the country. You can see that happening in Queensland. You can see it happening in New South Wales, perhaps.
In Western Australia.
In Western Australia.
Possibly.
Yeah.
New South Wales might be the tough one.
It might be the tough one, but certainly if there was an election at the moment in Queensland, I think Labor would be struggling to win more than 1 Senate seat, and 2 would be the absolute maximum. And I think, from what I'm hearing, the same is the case in Western Australia. New South Wales could be a bit iffy, but the numbers in New South Wales are just as bad as they are in Queensland.